Welcome to the Art Coaching Club podcast. I'm your host, Haley Price, artist, owner of the online art gallery, The Scouted Studio, and business coach for artists. With experience starting and running my own art business, growing an online art gallery, and coaching artists internationally on how to grow their careers, I've learned the art world inside and out. I've made all of the mistakes so you don't have to. Every episode will be a little bit different, but I promise that each week I will show you how to tackle your biggest business challenges so you can get back in the studio doing what you love. Now let's get into it. Can you just introduce yourself and give a little bit about your background and kind of how your artistic career began?
Yes, definitely. Okay, well, I'm Elizabeth Bloom. I own the Studio E Bloom. I've been running it for the last 2 years now, which is crazy, time flies. But a little bit about my background, I guess, starting from a kid, I was like a creative kid. And then I had a close family friend who was a graphic designer. Everyone else in my family, they're creative in their personal lives, but not really like professional. My dad always like designed and built every house I grew up in, but he was like an engineer, but did that on the side. And they were encouraging of creativity, but didn't really fully understand going that path. I had a family friend who was a graphic designer. I used to love to write when I was little, I guess, high school, young. And then my senior year of high school, I became editor-in-chief of the paper. So I started laying it out and started realizing I liked InDesign a lot more than actually writing the articles. So then when I went into college, I actually went in undecided and then switched to be an art major after making it my minor and then changing. And I think I was actually talking to someone about that this weekend, about how much we put an emphasis on kids of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? And I think going in undecided and sometimes keeping an open mind is the best thing to do. So then I became an art major. I actually worked at my school paper doing ad design and really just, I think, have stayed really open. And that's kind of like how my business is now. I do a lot of different things for a lot of people. I specialize in doing branding specifically for women-owned businesses, but then I also am an illustrator. So I'll collab with people and do like dress patterns or illustration sets. I'll do wedding stationery for specific brides. Like, I think sometimes staying open and being a little bit of a jack of all trades within the creative industry is like the best way to have a successful creative business, because you're not scared to say, oh, I can do that.
Definitely. I mean, I have so many questions even just relating to that. I think I want to get more into your background and like the different career paths you've had along the way that have kind of taught you. But before we do, you were saying like you're kind of the jack of all trades. You do a lot of things, you work in a lot of projects. How do you know now, you're a little bit farther in your business, like what's a good fit versus what isn't when you are kind of accepting a lot of different types of work?
Yes, that's a huge question. And it's funny because I feel like this year is where I'm willing to say no more, or just saying, that's not a super great fit for me right now. A lot of it is honestly based on the person too. I think knowing whether your client is a good match for you. So even before I send pricing or something, I'll usually hop on a 10-15 minute call just to kind of, because people will send through an inquiry email and it's usually so short and you can't really get a good connection read on them. And that's a huge thing nowadays. I don't think people like connect enough. And I think having a quick 10-minute call, you can just really understand more of their needs and understand if you are a right fit. But I really am now kind of just specializing in like whether people need branding or like illustration collabs, which I love, and like art direction and stuff like that. So, but yeah, and then a little bit of wedding stationery. But yeah, I usually just hop on a quick call and just see if we are a right fit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip because I do think a lot of the what we do is so personalized. And I mean, you have a certain style, but you also have a certain type of person you want to work with and someone that's going to understand your vision and you're going to understand theirs. And I love just like a simple call hack. Like, I feel like that's one of those things that you spend 15 minutes on that and it saves you 15 hours in the long run.
Oh, 100%. And like the further you go in, you can kind of get a read if the person's serious or not, or, just has their ducks in a row and are ready to get started, because people can come to you with anything. They can be like, I thought of this idea yesterday, or I've been dreaming it up for 5 years. Like, it's always a mixed bucket of backgrounds.
Yeah. I want to take things back a little bit because you have worked for some bigger brands that a lot of our listeners will recognize, including Tuckernuck. I think you've worked with Vineyard Vines, a lot of others. Can you talk about how working with those other companies, like your time there and your time working with them, has influenced, your business mindset, your branding mindset now?
Oh my gosh, like incredibly so much. So basically, also like relating to creativity, once I decided like I wanted to be an art major, I wanted to do graphic design. I've just always been like a lover of fashion, wanted, a fashion girly, and kind of thought after going to college I would move to New York and do that. And I'm from the Virginia area. So when I was interviewing, I was also interviewing for jobs in DC. I got a job first out of school at an architecture firm, which was like a large company, which I kind of recommend to people first out of school because you kind of see how things are running. You get that little bit of experience. You're for a bigger company, it's not so fast paced. Because when you're fresh out of school, you don't know how an office runs and how like a team runs. So it's a lot of kind of admin learning in a way. But I always wanted to work in fashion. So as I was working at the architecture firm, I was, applying to jobs in New York, thinking about moving. But then actually I moved in to another apartment, and it's so funny because I had never heard of Tuckernuck. This was back in, gosh, 2017, and they were just starting to kind of grow. They'd been around for like 5 years at that point, but it was when they were like starting to hire a little bit more, like just kind of growing a little bit. And I had a roommate that was actually looking on the site for a job for herself, and then was like, hey, they're hiring a graphic designer. I know you're looking for a job. Why don't you apply? So I just applied online. I think I was like one of the first people hired that wasn't like a family friend because they were like so small at that point. I think I was like the 10th or 12th hire. I was only 25, which I think going in that like route of going corporate and then going to a startup is really good because I had like that background knowledge of how kind of a corporation should run, what I should ask for,
Yeah.
those kind of things in the background. But I was basically the first graphic design hire, which I helped with. I mean, that's probably why my business is so multifaceted now is I was doing homepage layout, going on photo shoots, I did like their current logo I designed and branding, gosh, daily email designs. Like I just learned how to work also very fast paced, make decisions and run with it. I was working like directly with the founders, and we were all kind of like learning together in a way, which is like such a really cool experience that not a lot of people get to have. So I was there for almost 6 years, which was like a pivotal point, I feel like, in your career from when you're like 25 into your early 30s.
Yeah.
And there I got to work with a lot of cool brands. So that like through Tuckernuck, I got to work with Vineyard Vines. I worked with Tervis Tumblr. I worked with a lot of home decor brands. And, I was doing all these really cool collaborations where, they're still selling a lot of these products on the site, which is amazing. And I was kind of starting to get that feeling. And I think a lot of people it's like next levels in your career where when you're in your 20s, you're like, I just want to make art. Like, I don't care. It's in someone's house. That's so cool,
Right.
And then you start getting further down and you're like, actually, like, I want to have a little more say. Like, I want to have my name on it. I want to do something that way, But I feel like so much, it's funny with Tuckernuck, and a lot of the brand is like them, but a lot of the brand was a lot of me too, in my own style. Cause I would kind of say like my style is a lot of their style, where it's that like timeless with a little bit of whimsy. I'm a little bit more like personally, like a little bit more earthy than I would say Tuckernuck is.
Mhm.
But I think, while I am a fine artist, also, I'm, a graphic designer. So a lot of what I do is really working with a client and seeing who they are and then replicating that, which is typically like a timeless, but a little bit of like whimsical, a little bit of play, a little bit of hand done. I usually incorporate like my own hand into it somehow, which is really fun because I think then you can see throughout these brands where when that I did it, you can be like, oh, okay, I kind of see your hand in that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's that takes time, but it's you're finding your like style or your technique, the way you work. And then I think that's what makes you so sought after as an illustrator, as a designer, because they're like, I want that kind of look with our own spin on it. So you've really developed that, which I think is, takes time and it's hard to do, but I think you've done a really good job of it.
Yeah, no, completely. Oh, thank you so much also.
Yeah.
But I heard this thing one time, and I always recommend to all artists and designers, like watch a lot of documentaries, listen to podcasts, like go to art museums. There was, like the kind of they're a big graphic design agency. They're called like Pentagon and
Mhm.
or maybe they're Pentagram. I don't know. Look it up. But
I'll look it up. I'll link it.
perfect. But anyways, one of the famous like designers met with someone and then like sketched a logo really quick for them. And they were like, why should we pay you this amount? You did this in 5 seconds. And they were like, yeah, it took me, 2 minutes and 20 years.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a good quote because there is always so much background that comes with anything anyone does.
Well, and I think that kind of leads us into the pricing conversation too, because I know a lot of artists I talk to and work with and that probably are listening to this podcast are in that phase where they're, kind of what you touched on, like the earlier phase where, oh my gosh, my art is just in someone's home. And I think in that phase, you feel like I kind of want to do anything to get it there and you just price low or you don't price correctly. And I think once you get to the point maybe where you are, even maybe you're a little bit past that, where you're like kind of getting to decide like who you say yes to, who's a right fit, who you can say no to, you feel a little bit more comfortable with your pricing. But
Yeah,
did you have any
totally.
kind of like pricing? I mean, because you worked corporate, you probably had kind of a different view on these things. But like, how do you think about pricing and pricing for the years of work that went into something that now you're an expert in?
Yeah, no, 100%. And now I feel like I have more steady because when you first start and you're going from corporate in-house, because it's so different when you work, there's so many different stages of how you can go. You can either like work for an agency, so where you're probably seeing more of the pricing element, but then when you're coming as an in-house designer or artist, and then you're going into doing client-based work, there's a really great book. I'll have to send you it. It's called like I actually have it right here. It's called like the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook, and it's like a huge handbook that says like basically what you should charge. And honestly, a lot of it though was like listening to podcast, doing your research. Like I think that's a huge thing. And there's a huge difference too is whenever I have, and I hear so many people having the same experience, whenever someone's wanted to pay you less, they've always been a more difficult client. And then whenever someone is like, that pricing seems great, they're always a better fit because they trust you.
Yep.
And some things you have to be okay, like letting some things go. And then that just also allows more time for you to work on your personal work too, because as an artist, it's just so important to do the work for yourself as well as the client work. I think there needs to be a healthy balance between the two because if you're only doing client work, like I think that work will suffer if you're not sketching on the side, you're not focusing on inspiring yourself in that way. And there has to be time for that as well.
How are you dividing up that time? I mean, I know it's probably not specific, but like, how do you think about building out time for yourself to create? And are there specific things like either specific prompts you give yourself, specific side projects you're working on? Kind of how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually probably like the most challenging part of the business is like making time because you always want to put your clients first. I mean, I come from startup life where I'm like such a yes man. I'm like, yes, I'll get it to you in 10 minutes. I'm working a 14-hour, like I came from the background of working a 14-hour day, always making sure I was the only graphic designer for the first 4 years there. So if I didn't do it, no one else
Right.
was. And yeah, so it's really just setting that time aside. I actually time block on my calendar now. So I put at the end of each day an hour and a half. That is like my personal time to work. And I promised myself that starting in June on Thursdays, I was going to like black out time to paint all day. And that's going to be just working on my business. And then I also do this thing where it's kind of like a monthly mood where I find inspiration for the month. Like for June, I'm doing like it's called Ethereal Escape, and everything kind of I'm making is centered around this concept that I put together for myself because I do that for clients. Like when I'm working on a brand, we start with a mood board to kind of nail down who you are as a brand and as a client. And then I like to do that for myself on a monthly basis. Like, what am I inspired by? What am I listening to? How do I feel this month? And I think that really then influences my personal work as well.
Yeah, I might steal that. I'm definitely I'm like a very physical. I have bulletin boards, like I'm making mood boards, like literally cut for magazines all the time. But I've explored the monthly, kind of like updating it on a regular basis before, and I've just never stuck with it. But I feel like for me, putting together a mood board is the springboard that then leads me to have all the other ideas for my personal work. It just is like a really easy exercise, and I don't know if you're similar in that way, that just like can lead to all the other things I want to explore.
Yeah, everything I start client or for myself is like with a mood board because it kind of gets you excited. It gives you the direction. And yeah, I highly recommend doing it, honestly. And even if you miss a month, like that's okay. But if you kind
Yeah.
of at the end of a month start being like, what am I currently, because it will change from month to month. I mean, you're just watching even like different TV shows, traveling different places, and like that influences how you're feeling. And even if you just do 5 sketches based on that, like it's still getting those wheels turning.
Yeah, kind of maybe speaking more to the client side, but maybe you can go more in depth with what you just said. Where do you draw inspiration from? I mean, you kind of just touched on for yourself, like you create these monthly mood boards from everything from TV shows to music to, kind of the life around you. But if I were to work with you, as a client, how do you kind of start that inspiration project or inspiration for those different projects?
So I really do it based on like so many people, like they are their brand, and especially the people that come to me, like the women or, men that come to me, they are their brand. Like I just did like a 6-month contract with this Texas based e-commerce brand called St. Bernard, where I
Mhm.
came in and streamlined, their creative direction, their marketing, and just like kind of put their art direction, just kind of got it all in the direction they wanted to go. And we looked at the founders, like where did they vacation, where do they draw inspiration, what clothing brands are they wearing out of all the ones they sell, what's what are the words that just describe their day-to-day life, what is their coffee order, it's all those, like I always say, it's like all those small things that actually make the bigger picture. So most people are their brand. So it's really just kind of diving into the person themselves, which I love to do. Like I'm kind of a like introvert extrovert. So I love getting to
Same.
know people and like getting to know, like what makes them tick. And I think once you figure that out, it makes the rest of the process so easy. But having those conversations up front is so important. I always say the mood board like figuratively and literally puts us on the same page. And then my process from there is pretty streamlined. Then I do a round of sketches, and then I'll do feedback, and then 2 rounds of revisions, and we're pretty much there, which is good. And I feel like it's kind of gotten it like narrowed down into how the flow is.
Yeah, and something you said, you reiterated, is like they are their brand. I think this concept of like founder first brands or like personal brands or just putting yourself out there more is something I think a lot of people I talk to are nervous to do. But I've had a similar conversation, where I'm like, your brand, you're very much a part of your brand. You're creating it, especially as, two-dimensional artists. Like you're working for yourself a lot of the times, like you are the brand. But then it's really interesting because I also think you're very similar to your customer. So I think those kind of questions of where do you vacation? What is your coffee order? What do you like to do? Can give you so much insight into how to build a brand around yourself that's also going to speak to your customer. I just think that's
Yeah.
such a great point.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because I always say to people, it's so much easier to build a brand for someone else than it is for yourself.
Hmm.
Because for yourself, you're like, oh, but you're just seeing so much more than what you're seeing for like a client.
Right.
But yeah, exactly that. And the people that come to me are those founder, driven brands that want to portray authenticity. Like they are like, we live this lifestyle. Those are the brands I work with. Or like I just did a set of mahjong tiles. I'm actually going to do a second set with this brand called Miss Mahjong. They're wonderful, and all these women's play mahjong. So like
Yeah.
they're all the brands I work with are utilizing their own product, and like they are it. So it just always makes sense in that way.
Yeah, well, touching on, it being harder to brand other people, other businesses than yourself, how are you thinking about your own brand and your own business, and how are you kind of working on yourself in that way?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's actually like a huge focus I'm having on this year is like my own brand. That's why I'm setting Thursdays aside for my own brand and my
Yeah.
own art collection. And I'm going to be releasing more like actual collections instead of like one-off paintings. I think that's been a huge focus of mine is
Hmm.
focusing on that. And like also when I do collaborations, it's always like Elizabeth Bloom times or Studio E Bloom, times Miss Mahjong, or
Right.
I did one with Flores and Lane where they did a bunch of dresses and like, I did a wallpaper release with Liza Pruitt and it was like Elizabeth Bloom times Liza
Mhm.
Pruitt and just making sure like we're cross marketing in that way. And then a huge push I'm going to have in this upcoming year is releasing stuff on my own site, releasing more collections of fine art and prints, and probably getting into more home decor items on my own personal site too. And splitting the business up a little bit more evenly between client and my own brand, because I think every artist suffers and every creative business owner suffers with like that, juxtaposition between the two.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting too. I mean, I see the vision and I'm excited to see it play out. Something we kind of skipped over that I want to like circle back on is how did you transition and like what did it look like from working from someone else at Tuckernuck to doing so much of this on your own? Like, how did that transition play out? How did you decide you were ready to kind of pursue more of these projects on your own? What did that look like?
Oh my gosh, it was really hard because I had been there and I'm still very close with a lot of the women that work there and have such a great relationship with them. So it was really hard, when I was first there for the first couple of years, I was like, I could just work here for 40 years and be happy. I had always wanted to work in fashion. I had achieved that. And then I was now managing the graphic design team. But like with anything, when you're working in house, things get stagnant. Like, yeah, we were making new brands that like I was getting to do the branding for, but like, you can only make a certain amount of email designs about like the swing sweater. Like, and then you're just
Right.
kind of you're just ready to move on. And
Hmm.
I think also a lot of people need to be told that like it's okay for your dream to change. Like you are allowed to have your dreams change and that is okay. So I struggled probably for a little bit being like, okay, I'm ready to leave. And a huge thing too at Tuckernuck, like not anybody ever really leaves. So it's like kind of, they have a great retention rate. So yeah, so it was definitely really challenging, but to make that decision. But I'm a planner and I think if you're gonna go into business for yourself, and it's so important, and I hate that creatives get the taboo of like, oh, they're a creative. I even when I got an art degree, I wanted to get a business minor and my college like wouldn't allow it, which I was like, every artist should get a business minor. Like,
Yeah, I double majored in art and business. My,
yeah,
but I had to like do all these extra classes. Like it wasn't easy. Like school did not make it easy.
which is crazy. It's like they should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically I was working there and then I kind of started like updating my portfolio with just different projects. I would just, and it kind of happened a little bit organically. Like I was going to my hairdresser and she was like, oh, she had like a studio, like a one seat in a salon. And she was like, I'm actually opening up a salon myself. Like, I know you do graphic design. Do you want to do the branding? And then like, I was like, okay. And things started happening organically. I put like my own wedding suite on my portfolio. And then, someone reached out to me and I did their wedding suite. So I think it was, I had a friend that left Tuckernuck that was working for another business who reached out about illustration work. Like it started happening a little bit organically. And then the year I was going to leave, I took on a client, that was a little bit more steady and built it up. But to be kind of have some overlap, which honestly, the year that you are getting ready to leave and launch your creative business and you're working still full time at your job, I would say is like the hardest part of running the business. Like everything from there, once you go into being like, I'm doing this full time, all full force, yeah, it's hard. It's like more scary in a way than it is actually hard because you now have the time to do it. But
Right.
I would definitely suggest like building up at least like 1 to 2 steady clients, just so you feel like you might not be making your exact income back right away, but like you could pay your bills, you save up. I definitely did like, which I recommend for everyone to always have 6 months of savings ahead of time just to make sure you can cover. And then I just like hit the ground running. Like when I left, I was like in people's DMs, messaging them. I was like, I was putting myself out there. It's just, you cannot be afraid of a no. It's
Yeah.
okay. Just put yourself out there. Who cares?
Yeah. Can we talk about self-promotion a little bit? Can you talk about like obviously early phase is what that looked like and then even now, like how are we marketing ourselves? How are you getting yourself out there? What does that look like? Because it's hard, I know.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, it's so funny because when I was working at Tuckernuck, like I really honestly got such a marketing education there because like they're so good at it and like I learned so much from being there and then shaped a lot of what like it looked like because for the longest time it was like me and one marketing girl and we were doing, making a lot of the decisions when it came to paid versus organic and everything. And like, I would definitely say my strong suit, like I good in paid marketing too, but I would say my strong suit is definitely more organic marketing. But it's really just making sure it's funneling through everything. Like I would never tell any client even or myself, don't put all your eggs into TikTok. Don't put all your eggs into Instagram. Like I post across everything. I made my Pinterest a business account, which Pinterest is such a good driver for your website for prints and originals. Like people are looking for paintings there more, I would say, than Instagram. Instagram drives a lot of client work, but I would say making your Pinterest a business account will drive a lot of print sales. Making sure you're posting on LinkedIn too. Like I try to at least once a week post, if I just got something new up on my website, I post on LinkedIn as well. Like I hit all the channels. I think like there's not just one way to market. You have to make sure you're going through all the funnels. That's really, really important. And then also, even I had for the longest time, I had originally built my portfolio on Squarespace. And then when I opened up my shop, I had it on Shopify. I had it split. And then in the last 6 months, I was like, I need to focus on getting it all onto Shopify and not having it split. And I've done that. And I'm like still in the process, but I've seen a huge increase from like the SEO and like having a blog on my site. And, I wish I could update it even more, but like you just going and trying and doing it and just seeing what works and don't be afraid for you to get just a couple likes but put it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we have to get over the fear of like putting ourselves out there. And I'm kind of the same as you. I just put everything slightly varied on every platform. But something that, I mean, I love Pinterest, but something I'm new to is LinkedIn. And I actually, it came up on a couple podcasts ago. Another person was talking about using LinkedIn, and that's a new one for me. Can you go into a little bit more depth? I know you kind of touched on it, but like, what are you actually posting on this platform and like, how are people reacting? Like, what is LinkedIn? Like, can you give me like a 2 second overview of how you're using it and how it kind of leads to leads and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I was first starting out too, I just went through and saw any of the brands I would potentially want to work with, start adding people. Like, if you want to work with that brand, connect with that person. You don't know. And then if you reach out to them further down, they could be like, oh, we're connected on LinkedIn. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that, just sending a connection request to a brand that you potentially want to work with. It's such a great resource to see who to even contact at the brand you want to work with. And then I pretty much will post honestly what I will post on Instagram onto LinkedIn. Like if I just did a branding project, I'll post all of the pieces of the branding, like the logo, the website mockup, the icons, and then a description of what I would put in my portfolio and the link to my portfolio and post it there. And you don't know, you just connected with a bunch of these different people. Like they could see it, like it, and then reach out to you for a project. I mean, it's so crazy because I had like a work friend, she runs her own business too. She's a writer and she was like, wow, you've been killing the LinkedIn game. And I was like, no, I'm just like putting it on my calendar. Like if you want to do something, put it on your block it on your calendar and then it gets done. But
Yeah.
don't overschedule yourself. That's something I've learned. Like I no longer schedule more than like 4 different types of things in one day because otherwise it's just too much.
Yeah, no, I think that's important too. I mean, I think you have to slowly fold in these things and make sure you're not spending, having a whole day that's just you're going from task to task to task. We also need breathing room. I mean, I think that's so important as a creative. You need like some open space in your calendar just to have the creativity spark, at least in my opinion. I'm like, I need days where I can like just go think and not have like 18 calls or like pre-prescribed tasks.
Yeah, that's why I was like I was like starting in June. I was like I'm doing Thursdays for
Mhm.
Studio Eat Bloom. And like I was just like I need that this year. I need to carve that out or these other things won't happen, you know? And you just have to also balance the priority within your own business and just making time for that. And I've learned a lot more, like it's okay to slow down a little bit as well. You know, you don't always need to be full gas pedal down.
Absolutely. What's one challenge that maybe you didn't see coming in your career? Has there been, I mean, there's probably more than one, but is there anything that immediately comes to mind that has been, maybe a little bit of a stumbling block or a little more difficult as you've grown your personal business?
Yeah, I think just going back to that balancing your, 'cause, you know, I that was a huge reason why I left Tuckernuck was I wanted to have time to focus on my fine art. I wanted to have time to focus on my paintings and, you know, working on my personal brand. And then I adore working with clients. Like they're just so wonderful. I'm such a socialized, like I love to socialize. So I get that
Yeah.
from my clients and you just get, I mean, I got really inspired working at Tuckernuck, but working with like the variations of e-commerce brands, fashion brands, getting to travel to see people, like the amount I've grown in the last 2 years is so huge compared to any other time in my life because I'm getting so much different exposure. But I have to constantly remind myself, like, oh, the reason why I left a job I really loved with great people too was to also like focus on my fine art. So I think a big challenge is staying rooted in doing personal work that isn't always, you're not going to see the like financial benefit right away, and that's okay. And just reminding yourself that that's okay. It's easier said than done, but you know, I think we all need to remember to like use our sketchbooks.
Literally, it's something I have to remind myself. Like, I feel like I go through periods like every 6 months, and I'm like, I'm gonna use my sketchbook every day again, and then I like fall off, and then I try to get into it again. But
It's always
yes,
at the beginning of the year. It's like the first month at the beginning of the year. I'm like, my sketchbook, or like the first 2 months, my sketchbook is doing
yep,
great. And then the warm weather comes, and you're like, oh, I could let go on a walk outside.
exactly. Well, I kind of want to talk about growth a little bit. So, since you've gone full time, you're doing this, like what has really worked and maybe what hasn't worked to help your business grow? I mean, we've touched on some of just like the marketing platforms, but is there anything that stands out, like word of mouth, things that have worked really well for you? And is there anything that stood out that maybe you're like, I went down this rabbit hole and it did not work out?
Yes, I think a huge thing I did at the beginning, which was really good, and I think I partially got lucky as well, was I had reached out to an art advisor on who lives in DC, her and she's fabulous. And just because I was just like, oh, you started your own business, let's grab coffee. And then she knew a bunch of other creative entrepreneurs in the area that were women. And then now I have this great group chat of other creative women in my area that are doing, like, one's a real estate agent, one's a writer, one's an art advisor, like, you know, one's a social media person. Actually, another person that I used to work with at Tuckernuck who started her own business. Her name's Lily Sykes. She's like a genius marketer. She lives in New York. We have a standing last Thursday of the month call to just be like, what's going on with your business? What's going, and the amount of just like networking within a small, even like a group of a small amount of women, I've gotten different jobs from them. Even like Anne hosted a happy hour. I went there, and then the girls from DC Maj connected me with Miss Mahjong. Like, just making sure you're attending in-person things is really
Yeah.
important too. And I mean, as much as like I always say to people kind of jokingly, like when we're doing stuff, I'm like, oh, this is why I chose to be an artist. I get to paint in my room alone. And I like love that. But you have to, in order to like truly have a successful creative business that's paying your bills, you're feeling like you're living, you feel like you're moving forward, you feel like year over year you're having growth, you need to connect with others. Because, and think of them too, like if something comes up that I'm not great for, I'll recommend them, you know. And just making sure you're building that network. Networking is just so important.
Yeah, and I think it's also going beyond, and I mean, obviously going beyond social media. I think we had this weird like Instagram blew up like COVID times and people just felt like they could like rely on these platforms. And I'm not saying they're not valuable in certain ways, but I'm like, for your business to really grow, you have to get out there and talk to people in person and not even talk to people with like just the expectation they're going to do something for you. I just feel like I love meeting with other creatives. And a lot of times I'll talk to somebody that, I feel like we have nothing necessarily like we wouldn't work together or something like that, but it's just those conversations that sparks an idea in me, or maybe I can refer them to someone that might be helpful, or I have a friend that, she's a fashion designer, and then I know someone that owns a business, like a store, and it's like you just never know where those conversations will lead, and it's harder to facilitate those without meeting in person, I feel like.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think dropping that, a lot of people treat like, I don't know, they treat so many things as like transactional. And I don't like that. Like things life
Exactly.
isn't transactional. It's more about, I'll meet with coffee when younger artists will reach out to me. And if like I can, I'll hop on a call with them because you've got to pay things forward.
Yeah.
It's all a circle. And honestly, that's just life. We're all here to just try to help each other a little bit.
Yeah, and it will come back to you. I feel like it's great to pay it forward, and I also just feel like it reminds me that I'm like doing it too. Sometimes paying it forward and getting coffee with a younger artist or something like that. I'm like, okay, I was in your shoes once. Like I actually am progressing. Like it's that good reminder too of what we've achieved.
Yeah, it's so easy to be like, oh my gosh, I thought about this on Monday. I actually took some time to paint outside in my backyard. The weather was so beautiful. And, I was just out there with my dog and I was like, gosh, like little Liz, who was in art school, like I'm doing it, it's cool. And it just feels so fulfilling in that way. And I think true success is spending your time how you want to spend it. And that is just really fulfilling when you have those moments. And I think also just be kind to yourself. Like, don't be so hard. I've had those moments where I'm like, oh, I want to be here. I want to be doing this. And it's like, just take a little step forward each day. And sometimes you're going to have to take a step back, but at least you're moving.
Exactly. I love that. And I think the last thing that you shared that I just want to like agree with is that you do those Thursday calls with your friend who does social media. I think you said I do a power hour like on the last Friday of the month. I share an office with my friend Caroline, who has a marketing agency here in Charleston. And we just like don't come in with any expectations, but do the same thing every single Friday. We're just like, or every single last Friday of the month, we're like, what are you focusing on? What are your goals? Like, what's going on? And then it usually turns into like us really helping each other, but it just starts as a conversation. And I think having some kind of accountability partner or just someone you can have those conversations with that gets it can be so helpful.
Yes, yeah, and you can kind of be like, "Hey, I'm having this experience with a client. What do you think?" Or, anything like that. Also, I didn't realize you were in Charleston because my brother lives there. We'll have to get coffee next time I'm down.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime. I have a lot of friends in DC. I went to school in Virginia, so I feel like I'm up that way a lot.
Yeah, let me know. We can definitely like grab a drink or grab coffee or something. And next time I'm down, I always love hopping down there. It's just so fun. It's like such a fun city. And
Yeah,
I
well, it's a
a
creative
lot of
hub too.
yeah. Well, my brother owns a business there and I've helped him with it. And then I've worked with like this brand called Elizabeth James, the label
Mhm.
there. I did their branding last year. So I always love like hopping down there. Such an easy flight from DC too.
Yeah, it's so easy, and our airport's like the easiest thing ever. But yeah, definitely let me know next time you're here. And this has been so great. I kind of want to round us out with just kind of an overarching tip or lesson or something that I mean, I know obviously you've just shared a lot, but I always love to kind of, and you said you listen to a lot of books and podcasts, like what is something that you would recommend to other artists? And it can be like overarching, big lesson, or it can be, hey, these are three podcasts or three books that have really made a difference in my life. It doesn't have to be three, but really anything that comes to mind that you think you could pass on to other creatives.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, it's just make time for play. Like whether that's sketching, whether that's going on a walk, like be in nature and just make time for like play and thought and like exactly that. Listen to podcasts, listen to documentaries, find the things that you're interested in. I even say that this is like so off topic, but my friend and I were talking about investing and she was like, "Oh, I want to invest more." And I was like, "Oh, my husband always tells me the best things to invest in are brands you actually follow."
Mhm.
So that's just like even with your time. Like if you want to work for the Hill House or something, like go make a pattern design you think would be on one of their dresses. Like make up your own projects for yourself. Before I worked at Tuckernuck, like I didn't work at any fashion brand, but I did a branding class my last semester of college and I made up this whole fashion brand and like did hang tags, had it all in my portfolio. So like if you want to do a certain type of job, make it up, put it in your portfolio, and have it to show to someone. Like, you don't always have to wait for a client to come to you. Like, you have the ability to create it on your own.
I love that. I think that's such good advice. And I think that's what a lot of people need to hear too. It's like, how do I get the ball moving, or how do I get the first client if I don't have things to show yet? It's like make things to show.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you want to work with this brand, do some mock-ups and put it together and put it on your portfolio and see where it goes from there, you know?
Yeah, I love it. Well, let us know how people can learn more about you, see your stuff. I know you're on a lot of different places, social accounts, website, all that stuff.
Yes. Okay. Well, you can find me on Instagram. I post there a lot at Studio E Bloom. And then my website is also studioebloom.com. There you can see a ton of my different, like projects till I post on my blog, like different places I travel to and all. I'm a huge traveler. I love hiking and everything. So if you guys need tips, it'll be there too. On LinkedIn is Elizabeth Bloom, and then Pinterest is Studio E Bloom. So those are the most. Oh, and I've been posting on TikTok more too. So you can check me out there as of like this week. So
Love
you
it.
can find me at all of those at either Studio E Bloom or Elizabeth Bloom for like LinkedIn. But so yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time.